All right, having looked at the question, what are judgments or beliefs and the different kinds, and the fact that they can be true or false, we're going to look at the question of justification of a judgment or belief. So, the obvious fact that judgments or belief have truth value and are proposed as being true raises the issue of what justifies us in holding and proclaiming that any given belief is true. That is, what evidence do we have to support our belief? Right? So I hold all kinds of beliefs and judgments. Right? I believe, I hold it as true that Christ rose from the dead. Well, what justifies me in believing that? What evidence do I have for that? Is that knowledge? Right? I believe it's true that I'm sitting in front of a desk. Well, what justifies me in holding that to be true? What evidence do I have to support my belief? So we're going to spend some time talking about justification. This actually comes, when this comes into epistemology, the theory of knowledge, this becomes pretty important. Actually becomes really important because the traditional definition or the longly accepted definition of knowledge, what does it mean that I know something, is justified true belief. Right? If I know something, well, I certainly have a belief about it. And if I know something, it also has to be true. It actually has to obtain in the real world. So it has to be a true belief. But not just any true belief, right? I have to be justified. I have to have evidence for what I believe to really call it knowledge. So we're going to ask the question about what this justification consists. Well, a few points here about this. First, we want to be sure to distinguish between justified beliefs and true beliefs. They're not always exactly the same thing. For example, I might have a justified belief that Frank is in Cleveland. Why? Well, because maybe I drove him to the airport, and I know that our company planned the business trip for him, and I have no reason to believe that he went anywhere else. So it's justified belief. But he might not actually be in Cleveland, right? It might not be true. Unbeknown to me, the plane was routed to Pittsburgh owing to bad weather. Thus, my belief is false, but still justified. On the other hand, my cousin Larry, a pathological liar who consistently makes inflated and grandiose claims, all of which to date have proven false, might try to convince me that he's been hired as an actor in a George Lucas film. It seems very unlikely that I should take this claim as justified based on all of that, but suppose that it were actually true. So there can be true beliefs that aren't justified or justified beliefs that aren't true. So we want to distinguish that. Another thing when it comes to justification is the subjectivity of justification. In general, the justification of a belief is relative to individuals holding those beliefs, right? Not their truth. Truth isn't subjective here, but my justification for holding that belief is relative to me, right? And to the actual information or evidence available to me. For example, given what I know, I'm justified in believing that Frank is in Cleveland. But given what Frank's wife knows, that Frank called her from the Pittsburgh airport, that belief is not justified for her, right? So it's all about what information and evidence the individual has that justifies them in their belief. And that changes from subject to subject. Moreover, belief justification comes in degrees. I can be more or less justified in holding a belief. For example, I both knew the company had ordered Frank to Cleveland and actually put him on the plane. Office mate Nell only knew that the company had ordered Frank to Cleveland. Thus, my belief that Frank is in Cleveland is more justified than Nell's. Nevertheless, below a certain degree of justification, we'd have to say that beliefs would actually be said to be unjustified. So the more evidence, the more reason, the more justified my beliefs are. And then we can also talk about the defeat of justification. Right? The defeat of justification refers to any information, either known or unknown by an individual, which, if it were known, would tend to undercut that individual's justification for a particular belief, we call that a defeater of the justification for that belief. So for example, the weather reports about the terrible storm over Cleveland and the rerouting of numerous flights bound for Cleveland, had it been known by me, would have undercut or lessened the justification I had for believing that Frank was in Cleveland. A justification for a particular belief such that there exists information is said to be defeasible, right? It's defeasible or defeatable. So I might have that belief, and yet it is an actual defeasible justification based on information that perhaps I don't know. Well, when we come back, we'll see that there's actually more than one kind of justification. There's two levels to this justification.